So we're picking up with Perek Beis, towards the end of Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud Ches. Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud Ches. So our goal will be tonight to work on Perek Gimel, and that will set us up for the finale of next week, concluding with Perek Dalet. So tonight,
we can put Michael on Zoom.
Yeah, Michael could be on Zoom next week, even if you're not here, or you can listen to it afterwards. Okay, so Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud Ches. We concluded 2 weeks ago. Last week we didn't have Shiur. 2 weeks ago we concluded with Rus arriving back at Naomi's house, and she has a lot of food. We said, just to go back, that last, she brought back Vayihi ke'efa se'orim. She brought an ephah of barley, and we pointed out at that point how much practically is an ephah. So we know that by the mun in Parshas B'Shalach, the Torah tells us that the mun was the amount of mun that they got was an omer. An omer, and the omer is 1/10 of an ephah. Omer asiris ha'ephah is 1/10 of an ephah, and we know the omer as well was also the equivalent food of one meal, like a 1 day's meal. So an ephah would be 10 times that amount, right? So it would be 10 days worth of food. And in this case, I guess for Naomi and Rus, so it would be 5 days worth of food for 2 people. So that was a lot of food that she got. So pasuk Yud Ches. And we're going to see in a moment that Naomi is going to respond to that. The fact that it's so much, she knows that something's going on. So pasuk Yud Ches, we begin. Batisa vatavo ha'ir, and she carried it, and she comes to the city. Vatera chamosa es asher liketa, and her mother-in-law sees what she gathered. Vatotze vatitein la, and she took it out and she shared it with her mother-in-law. Es asher hosira misava. What was left over, misava, I guess, from what she had after she had eaten her fill, and there was still obviously left over for her mother-in-law to eat. Vatomer la chamosa, pasuk yotes. So her mother-in-law says to her, Eifo likata tayom, where were you collecting today?
I have a question for that. I know this sounds like it's bad, like where'd you snore today or something?
Right. Good. Yes. Okay. So I don't know what is, but she's clearly asking based, presumably because of the fact that she's like, how did you get so much? So either were you schnorring or did something else happen? Like you were just collecting and you ended up with much more than someone who's normally collecting. So she says, Va'ana asis, and where did you go, asis, to do this? Yehi makirech baruch, the one who recognized you should be blessed. So she seems to understand that there was somebody who went out of their way to kind of take care of her, so to speak. Right? She says, the one who recognized you, he should be blessed. And she told her mother-in-law, everything that she did with him. Vatomer, and her mother-in-law said, Shem ha'ish asher asisi imo. And then Rus says, and the name of the man who provided for me, Hayom, it was Boaz.
I don't think I understand that, because they were doing a lot of begging for a while. So in other words, you beg on the street, you collect at a corner or something, maybe you come home with $30, $20, So she came home with $1,000,
That's essentially right. That would be like the equivalent, yes, and yeah.
So that's why
it's like a light goes off and says something.
Was doing it too. They said somewhere they're scratching for food.
And here she comes home and hits the jackpot.
Okay, so Naomi was doing it too.
Pasuk Chaf, Vatomer Naomi lechalasa. So Naomi then says to her daughter-in-law, Baruch hu la Adonai, blessed is he to God, Asher lo azav chazdo, that Hashem did not, Asher lo azav chazdo es hachayim ve'es hamesim, he did not leave his kindness towards the living people and the dead people. Vatomer la Naomi, and Naomi said to her, Karov lanu ha'ish, this man is close to us. Migo aleinu, he is our redeemer. So 2 things to point out. First of all, I kind of slipped a moment there. It says, right, blessed is Hashem that he did not, his kindness did not leave the Chaim and the Mason. There's a discussion here who she's referring to. She's saying, thank you Hashem, that Hashem's kindness was always there for the dead and the living? Or is she saying, blessed are you Hashem that you led us into the field of Boaz, and Boaz has now done kindness for the living and the dead. So who would the living and the dead be? So if it's Hashem, so she would be saying, Hashem took care of us following the death of my children, Nachman and Kilya. And now look what he's doing. He's taking care of us now because he's led us into the field and we hit the jackpot. alternatively, some people say she's referring to Boaz. So what would be the chesed which Boaz is doing with the dead? So this might be the hint that Nami sees, like, oh, now we bumped into a relative, and now he can potentially do some kind of kindness and kick it in for the dead, meaning for Machlon and Kilyon, maybe now he can step in and do something generous on their behalf. Okay, and then Nami says, he's our relative. This guy, you think he's just a guy named Boaz. I'm telling you, he's Migo Aleinu. So what is the Redeemer? What is this? So it actually works out. It's this week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha, we know that there's, in Parshas Bahar, it says there is a concept of, we know that when a person sells land in Israel, when a person sells their property, real estate, in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, so there's a concept of Yovel, that the property goes back to the owner in Yovel. Okay. Before that even occurs, there's actually another law. And the Torah tells us that if I have to sell property, which belongs to my family, my shevet, my estate, and I have to sell it, so there is a rule that I am allowed, any point up until Yovel, I am allowed to force the sale back from the buyer. Okay, so I have property, it belongs to me because I'm Shevet Levi, so we didn't have any property, but someone else's property than Shevet Reuven, they have property, and they sell it because they have no money. They have to sell the land.
You have to pay the pawn ticket then, right?
So what do you mean by that?
Well, I'm saying it's like almost like a pawn, like they gave you money for it, so you have to pay them back.
Right, correct, exactly. Yeah, essentially. What do you say? No, I don't. No. I can't say I'm up on that. Okay, so Naomi, on a simple level, what Naomi's saying is, oh, this guy is our Goalenu, meaning Rashi says kind of what Rob was saying about them, like, picking and scraping for food. So Naomi says, we had to sell our land, and here is this important person, and he is related to us, so he is Goalenu. He can potentially, on our behalf, buy back any land which we had to sell. Because the Torah says if the person can't buy it back themselves, a relative can do it. So he potentially can do it. That's really all essentially Naomi's saying. We're going to see it's going to turn into a little bit more than that. Vatomer Rus Hamaovia. So Rus says, please.
So when Elimelech left,
yes.
what did he do with his field? He sold his field, presumably. He sold his property.
So that's a good question. The question was, when Elimelech left, did he sell his property? So it seems to me, I don't, unless someone knows otherwise, like I don't know anywhere where it explicitly discusses it. It seems to me you have two options. Either he sold his property and then he got it down, or potentially he still held on to it. And when the idea would be, if he did hold on to it, then when Naomi and Rus came back, because of their financial state, they were forced to sell that property. I mean, it could go either way. I don't know which one it was. Yeah. Okay. Maybe part of that, by the way, would depend on whether he was planning on coming back, right? Meaning if he was planning on coming back, then you can make the argument that he would have held on to the land because he was only going temporarily. But if he really believed that he was done, which doesn't sound like it, most people make it, most Mepharshim seem to say he was leaving in order to come back. So then maybe you could say that he was planning that he held on to it and he was going to return. Pasuk Chaf Aleph. So Rus says, Gam kiyamar elai. He even also said to me, Im hana'arim asher li tidbakin. You should stay with the young men who I have here. Now, if you look back, really he said stay with the women, right? Not with the men, right? So the Medrash picks up on that. It says this was kind of like a slip of the tongue, so to speak, that there was still a little bit of Moavi, so to speak, in Rus, where there was this culture where they weren't careful about keeping the men and the women separate. And Boaz made a point to tell her to stay separate, stay with the women, Na'arosai. And she kind of just, when she's retelling it, she says, oh, he said, stay with my young men over here, which is not really what he said. Asher li tidbakin, ad im kilu, until they finish off. Es kol hakatzir asher li, until they finish harvesting. Pasuk chapes. Vatomer Naomi al Rus kalasa. So Naomi says to Rus her daughter-in-law, Tov biti, ki teitzi im na'arosav. It is good if you go out with his, and now she says with his daughter, with his young women, right? She changes it back to women. And they won't, approach you, or they won't bother you in another field. You should stay in Boaz's field. If he's helping you out and allowing you to stay there to collect, you should continue to do that. Pasuk Chaf Gimel, Vatidbak Benaras Boaz, and she clung to the young women around Boaz, Lalake, to collect Ad Kilos Kitzir Hasaorim, until the barley harvest time concluded, Ukitzir Hachitim, and the wheat harvest, Vateshev Es Chamosa, and then she lived with her mother-in-law. We're going to see in a moment why that's important, that she was there until the harvest was over. That's going to come up in the next parak. So here we go now, Pasuk Gimel. Sorry, parak Gimel. Vatomer la Naomi Chamosa. So now Naomi says to her, Biti, my daughter, Halo avakesh lach manoach. I will seek for you manoach, like peace or rest. Asher yitav lach, so that it will be good for you.
So she adopted her, or I guess because it was the daughter-in-law.
Why? Because she keeps calling her daughter.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
So she was theoretically adopted, or because it was the daughter.
Either that, or she, right, or it's just like a term of endearment, perhaps, that she's calling her my daughter, even though she's a daughter-in-law. Okay, so now Naomi says, basically, she says, I would like to try to do something for you to find manoach. Okay, manoach. What does that mean? So let's take a look. Pasuk Beis Va'ata. Now, Halo Boaz Mo Datanu. Boaz is our relative. Asher Hayis Es Na'arasav. You have been with his young women. Hinehu Zora Es Goren Hasaorim Halayla. He is going to be winnowing his barley tonight. Virachatzt Vasacht. And you should wash yourself, Vasacht, and anoint yourself. Visamt simlosayich, and you should put on clothing, alayich, on yourself. V'yaradit hagoren, and you should go down to this threshing floor, the area where he is going to process his barley. Al tivadii leish, do not make yourself known to the man, meaning to Boaz. Don't let him know that you're coming there. Ad kaloso la'echol v'lishtos, until he finishes eating and drinking. Okay. So just a few points here. Let's go. Let's actually read the next pasuk, and then we'll kind of explain Beis Gimel Dal together. Pasuk Dal, Vihi b'shachvo, and it will be in the future when he lies down. V'yadat es hamakom asher yishkav sham. You should take note of the place where he will be lying down. Uvas, and you should come. Vigilis margilosav. And you should reveal margilosav, comes from the word raglayim, his feet. You should uncover his feet, v'shachavt, and then you should lie down. V'hu yagid lach, and he will tell you, eis asher tasin, what you should do. Okay. V'tomer elah, and then Rus responds, kol asher tomri elai e'eseh. Everything you say to me to do, I will do. Okay. So Naomi comes up with this plan, which seems very interesting. What exactly is going on here? So a few points to make, and then we're going to take a look at the Malbim here. First of all, what exactly, if you look at Pasuk Gimel, there's a repeating theme in Pasuk Gimel. You'll notice there are a few extra words there in the Pasuk. It says, V'rachatzt vasacht, you should wash yourself and anoint yourself with oil. V'samt simlosayich, alayich, v'yoradit. Now, on all those words which are Naomi saying to Rus, you should do this, you should do this. If you look, the way it's actually written in the Navi, or in the Ksuvim, it says, Visamti, and I will put on. V'yaraditi, and I will go down. Do they have that in Art Scroll 1? I don't know if do they have both there? So in the English, they're just going to translate. Do they have in the Hebrew, do they have both? They have the Kriya Ksiv. Okay, so we have something going on here, which is worth taking note of. It's something called Kri Uksiv. It's the way something is written and the way something is read. And you have this often in the Torah as well. Sometimes there are words in the Torah which are written a certain way, and when we lane them, we actually don't lane them the way they're written in the Torah. And this is an example of this. The pasuk actually says, Naomi really says, and I will put on clothing, and I will go down to the threshing floor. That's what it actually says, Yaraditi, I will go down. But when we read it, we say Yaradit, you will go down. So who's going down, right? Who's going down, and why are we changing it? So the Maharal explains in his Sefer Tiferes Yisrael, he explains the concept of Kriyuk Siv. And he basically says that what's going on here is anytime you have a Kriyuk Siv, something is written one way, but read another way, there's basically like a double layer of meaning. And the Kri, the way we read it to the audience who's listening, the way we read it is the way that makes sense based on the way the story is flowing. So the way the story is going is that Naomi is telling Rus, this is what I need you to do. Do this, do this, do this, do this. Right? In second person, right? Do this, do this, do this. But the way it's kesiv, the way it's written, the Maral says, is like this like underlying meaning of the text of what's going on. It's not something that like appears to be going on, but it's written there, but we don't say it outright to everyone to hear. So what is this underlying thing going on here? That Naomi's saying, in a certain sense, you're doing all these things, but who's also doing them? Or who's going to go down with you? You're out of tea. I'm going to do it. Which Rashi says kind of, he alludes to this. Rashi says, right? Rashi says like, in my merit, you will go and try to do this act and be successful. Which brings up the question, and it's not so clear, is this whole thing that's about to happen, what Rus is embarking on, does Naomi want Rus to do this for Rus? Or is Naomi asking Rus to do this for Naomi?
Maybe for both of them, if she marries in, then she's getting security. It says in here security for you, but it'll be security for her too. Of course, if Ruth gains some wealth, she's going to share it with Naomi.
Okay, good point, Rob. So you're saying maybe it's kind of like it's actually both, perhaps. So, okay, I'm just pointing that out. I mean, it doesn't really, it doesn't get any more clear than that as we go on, but there seems to be like a double thing here. Again, Rus is the one doing it, but Naomi's really pushing this, and that's the Kriyu Ksiv. And you'll notice that if you look out for Kriya Satorah, you'll see every once in a while we have that where the Balkori reads something, but it's not written that way in the Chumash, and that's what's going on. There's like a basic meaning to understand the text on a basic level, and then there's like a deeper meaning, something behind it, and that's the Ksiv. Okay, what is this idea about uncovering his feet? So I want to look at the Malbim that is on the sheet here. This is an allusion to the concept of Yibum or Chalitza. So we're somewhat familiar with the concept of Yibum. Person dies, they don't have any they don't have any children. So the surviving brother is supposed to marry the widow. Yeah, and in the event that the brother does not want to marry the widow, so the Torah tells us there's a concept called chalitza. And what is chalitza? The woman basically goes to the Beis Din, and in front of the Beis Din, the woman removes the shoe. It's like a very interesting ceremony. I was at one time. It's very interesting. And the woman, like, they like strap this shoe around the guy, and and then she comes along, the sister-in-law, the wife, and she removes this shoe and she takes it off of him. And then they say this is what should be done to the man who doesn't want to uphold his brother's home and marry his widow, and they call him Beis Chalutz Hanal, the home of the person who removed the shoe. Okay, it's an interesting process. Now, okay, that being said, many of the Meforshim say what's going on here is when she is telling Rus to go down while Boaz is sleeping and uncover his feet. What is she alluding to? She's alluding to this process of chalitza. Because by chalitza, what happens? There's a shoe, and the shoe is removed, and the foot is uncovered. Okay, so what exactly is this whole thing? Why does it work that way? So the Malbim explains the following idea. I'm going to read part of it inside. Vayhi b'shachvo, and number 2 in the source sheet. So the Malbim says, Shekvar be'arnu b'mekomos acherim, we have already explained in other places, mitam ha'mekubalim, the reason given by the Kabbalists, be'inyan ha'yibum v'chalitza sanal. What is the underlying concept of yibum and chalitza? Shehaguf hu na'al shel hanefesh. Okay, conceptually, the body is like the shoe of the soul. The body is like the shoe of the soul. He's going to explain what that means. What does that mean? She'i efshar l'neshama haruchanis la'amod ba'olam hagufim mibali haguf. You cannot have a neshama. Neshama cannot exist in this physical world among other physical things without the presence of a body. So the body is, so to speak, the container for the neshama, but not only that, it's what's allowing the neshama, which is spiritual, to exist in this world, which is physical. Okay. How does that, like a shoe? Kimo she'i efshar laha'anog v'harach la'amod b'makom refes batit below nal. Shelo yitanfu raglav. Just like a person whose delicate feet cannot exist on the ground, which is full of mud and dirt and things like that, which are harmful to the feet and make it dirty and things like that, a person can't, so to speak, exist on the ground without putting on a shoe. So the shoe is like the barrier, it's the container which allows the body to walk around and be present on earth, right? You could say in a certain sense maybe clothes are like that, but the truth is clothes really is more like an embarrassment thing, right? It's not necessarily protecting my body. I mean, you can make the argument maybe if it's very cold, but in general, right, the whole concept of clothes we see from Adam and Chava, right, is the idea they put them on because they're embarrassed. So the shoe is like the article which allows the body to be here on earth, and the body is what allows the soul to be present on earth. Okay. Ve'al sod zeh amar Hashem sha'al ne'alecha me'al raglecha. It is this concept that you'll find. What does Hashem tell Moshe Rabbeinu when he sees him by the burning bush? What does he say? Remove your shoes. So what's the concept there? He says, remove your shoes because the ground you are standing on is holy. So what does that do with removing my shoes? So he says that's the concept here. The concept is, right, the soul is in the body, like the body is on the shoe. If there is this very holy ground that's there, so to speak, there's this like intense holiness that's going on. So what happens? So God says in a certain sense, this place is like saturated with holiness. Your soul is, so to speak, like at home here, right? How do we physically display that? What do? Remove your shoes. Remove your shoes. That is the physical symbolism of showing that my soul is on earth, but it doesn't really need my body right now, just like my body doesn't need my shoes right now. That's what's going on. V'ha'ish hameis below banim, continuing the album, a person dies without children. Ve'ein lanafsho margoa, and their soul, so to speak, does not have any peace. V'hi odena mikashkeshes bi'ishto, and the soul is kind of like hanging around, so to speak, his wife. Asher lo asa ima pri, who did not produce a child. V'yimacha shemo miYisrael, and here is this man whose name is going to be just, you won't have a legacy that will continue. So he says, Kishiyabemo achiv v'yitein zera le'achiv. When the brother does yibum with the surviving, with the widow, ki'ilu nefesh hames ba'ashenis la'olam. It's in a certain spiritual sense, like the soul of the deceased has come back into the world in the form of what? Of the baby that's born. So essentially, the Malbim is saying, what's happening when you do yibum? When a person does yibum, what are they doing? They are providing a body for the soul of the brother to house the soul of the brother in a certain spiritual sense. So what does that have to do with chalitza? So if a person chooses not to do that, they're saying that soul of the brother, it's kind of like, hanging around. I'm not going to do yibum. I'm not providing a body for that soul to be contained in. So what do? We do chalitza. We remove the shoe. The woman removes the shoe of the brother and says, I'm taking off the shoe. You're not providing a shoe, so to speak, a body for the soul of your brother to be in. And therefore, I'm removing the shoe off of your foot. That's conceptually the interesting approach of chalitza, according to the Malbim.
Oh, yeah.
Interesting. It's a little deep, but yeah. Question or comment?
This is, sorry.
What happened if basically he died right after Yom Kippur, right after that a baby was conceived, and what would technically be like his judgment on Rosh Hashanah? Because
I don't know how Hashem will work that out. I'm not sure. If he dies right after there's a baby conceived, so they would wait to see if the baby ends up living.
No, I'm talking about like he dies and basically his wife there's chalitza.
Oh, there's a chalitza done, or there's a yibum?
There's yibum done. Yibum done basically right then there's a conceived baby. What would happen?
Oh, interesting idea. I don't know. I'm not sure how that's viewed. Yeah. So the Malbim says that's what Naomi's hinting to here. What's Naomi saying? Naomi's saying to Rus, go and uncover Boaz's feet. What does it mean to uncover his feet? Uncover his feet to allude to him, to say that what? There is an opportunity here for you to do what? For you to do some kind of Yibum act. Now we should clarify, I'm not going to read it inside. It was on the source sheet, number 1. This always confused me. I think it confuses a lot of people, at least speaking for myself. I never really understood this. This is not really Yibum going on here, right? Because what's the concept of Yibum? The concept of Yibum is that the brother marries the widow. Machlon and Kilyon died, right? So Rus is here, but that's it. It should be Machlon and Kilyon's brother marrying Rus, not Boaz. So it's not really Yibum. So the Ramban deals with this, and the Ramban says that it's interesting. The Ramban says before the Torah was given, Yibum actually was a thing. It was a concept that still existed before the Torah. And before the Torah was given, Yibum was done, really, by essentially any male relative of the deceased. To the extent, he says, even his father would marry the daughter-in-law.
You're saying in the world it was done, or by the nation?
So it sounds like it was, that's a good question. He says, the way the Ramban says it is, he says, all of the wise people before the Torah knew that there was a great benefit in marrying the widow, right? He then says that Yehuda was aware of this. He says Yehuda was aware of this. He was mekabel, this secret, this fundamental concept from his ancestors, right? And he explains that's what's going on with Yehuda. Why does Yehuda want to do the whole thing when his sons die? He wants to do the whole thing with Yibum and Tamar. Why? So he says the concept of Yibum existed, and the Ramban himself then expands that and says, yes, Yehuda really, it was a brother, right? But meaning what he initially wanted, right? He wanted his sons to marry Tamar. He says, but in general, there was a general concept of Yibum that applied in a broader sense, even outside of the brother, which would explain, by the way, what Yehuda himself was doing, right? I mean, he didn't know he was doing it, but Tamar, right? Why did Tamar want to be with Yehuda? So that would explain that. There's like a quasi-Yibum thing going on there, even though Yehuda is the father-in-law. And the Ramban says essentially what happened is when Hashem gave the Torah, what happened is Hashem says, if this situation ever occurs, I am outlawing any other relative. It is usher for any relative to do this act besides the brother. So Yibum kind of always existed, the concept. The Torah came and essentially zoned in and said Yibum is a thing that only the brother can do, no other relatives can do. And the Ramban explains, because the concept still existed, again, initially it existed in a broad form, he says that's really what's going on with Boaz, right? Boaz is not the brother, so he's not doing Yibum in the strict sense, right? But he's a cousin, and he is allowed, a cousin's allowed to marry, right? Cousins are allowed to marry each other. So he says he's allowed to marry her. Why does he want to do that? Because it's the same conceptual concept of Yibum. Right? What got outlawed after the Torah was given is that, let's say the father-in-law says, I'd like to marry my daughter-in-law now. So that, the Torah says, can't do. Father-in-law can't marry a daughter-in-law, even after the son passes away. So that, the Torah said, you can't do. But any other type of, conceptual Yibum, so that's fair game, and that's what Boaz wanted to do here. Now, you have to really say this, because Tzvi brought this up a few weeks ago. We talked about the question of were Machlon and Kilyon really married to Rus and Arpa? Right? Did they convert or not? So if they didn't convert and they married them as Gentile women, then there really wasn't Yibum at all. That was your question. Your question was like, what's the Yibum? I think you asked that a few weeks ago. You said, no, we were talking about the context. Maybe Michael asked it. Someone asked it, like, where, like, what kind of Yibum was there, right? You see what I'm saying? If Machlon and Kilyon didn't convert, so then Rus and Arpa were married to non-Jewish men. So there was no need for Yibum later. So again, you see, even there's no concept of Yibum, but there was still this, it wasn't Yibum in the strict sense, but there was some concept that but we were still kind of related, again, even though halachically they weren't really. But they wanted to do this for, Boaz was still related to Machlon and Kilyon. Even if Rus didn't convert, they were still related to Machlon and Kilyon. Okay, fine. So that's a little bit of that concept there. Okay, so she tells Rus to go down and to uncover his feet, which is alluding to the fact that there's an opportunity here for you. Okay, now many ask, why is this done in such like a funny fashion, right? Like, why don't they just approach him and they just say to him, like, look, we want to make this work. It's not really clear. One suggestion is that Naomi felt, perhaps, there's no proof in this in the Psukim, but perhaps Naomi felt that kind of startling Boaz and allowing him to come to this conclusion on his own may have been more effective than approaching him, which is a tactic, and that's a point, right? I mean, we do see that. You see that in general. You kind of see a similar concept in the Torah, right? Like after someone does something wrong, so Hashem says, right, Ayeka, where are you? Right? And they say, why is Hashem asking? He's kind of like drawing them in. It's not exactly the same, but similar concept here, where like if Boaz himself can come to the realization on his own through this interesting behavior here, like, oh gosh, I got to really step in, I got to do something. So then maybe that'll be more effective than just asking him point blank, at which point he might back off. That also explains, by the way, the whole thing about why the pasuk says, like, they waited. Rus hung out with them until the end of the barley and the wheat harvest. Like, who cares? So why is that important? So the Mefarshim say is that once the harvest was over, so that was the end of her continual contact with Boaz. So Naomi is waiting. She's hoping that what will happen the whole time. Rus is hanging around Boaz's field. She's hoping. She says that maybe something will happen. So the pasuk says she was there until the end of it, and then Perek Gimel begins. And what does Naomi say? I have this whole plan. Because she's hoping it will that Boaz will realize this. Once she sees the contact with Boaz is essentially over, because she's not going to be collecting anymore, because there's no more harvesting. Harvest is over. And that's it. And now it's the summer and they're good, they're finished. So she sends her in and comes up with this plan. So now we'll try to finish the parak and see what ends up happening. The pasuk Vatir et Hagoren. Okay. So Basi asked on the chat, sorry, just noticed this now. Isn't this called geula if it is done by any relative? Are you asking if it is called it, or you're saying, isn't that what it's called? I'm not sure what she means. Isn't this called geula if it is done by any relative? Oh, correct. Yes. Okay. So Basi's saying, yes. Basi's asking, I think she's asking the act that Boaz is doing, this what we're calling quasi-ibum or whatever it is, the term for it is geula. So that is correct. Yes, it is called geula. It is called redeeming, right? And the Ramban actually says that. The second to last line of the Ramban that's on the sheet, he says v'karu oso geula. The term for this is geula. So again, this gets back to that pasuk before when Rus says, I was hanging out with Boaz, and Naomi says, ding, light bulb, mi go aleinu, he's our goel. So again, it's very possible, Rashi doesn't say this, it's possible that's what she's alluding to. Ramban says that's the term. He's our goel, meaning, he's the guy who's going to do this act to, so to speak, quasi-yibum with you, which is called geula. Again, Rashi sees it as just buying back the field. But yes, it is called geula. Okay, pasuk vav. Vatir et Hagoren. And so she goes down to the threshing floor. And she does everything that her mother-in-law told her to do. Pasuk Zayin, Vayochal Boaz Vayesh. Boaz eats and he drinks Vayitav Libo, and he's very satisfied and happy. Vayavel Lishkav V'Ktzei Hareman. He comes to sleep, to lie down at the edge of the pile there. Why is he doing that? So Rashi says because there were ganavim around. Right, it's like when there's like riots, right? So the people like sleep in the stores, right? So everyone comes to like steal, So like he had to sleep with the stuff, but he was scared people were going to come and run away with it. Vatavo balot, and she came like I was going to say very quietly and in a way that's being unnoticed. Vatigal margolosav vatishkav, and she uncovers his feet vatishkav, and then she lies down. Okay. Vayihi b'chatzi halayla, and it was in the middle of the night. Vayecherad ha'ish vayila face. So Boaz, the man, vayecherad, he's like startled, he's shocked. Vayila face, and he's like gripped, so to speak. He's like held, like he's stiff. V'hinei isha shocheves margalosav, and there's a woman lying at his feet. Vayomer, and he says, Mi'at, who are you? Vatomer, and she says, Anochi Rus amasecha. I am Rus, your maidservant. Ufarasta kinafecha al amasecha. spread your kanaf on your maidservant, kigol ata, because you're the redeemer. So what does that mean? Spread your kanaf. So kanaf could have one of two meanings, right? Right, kanfei yona, right? We say, right, or al kanfei nisharim, right? We will go on kanfei nisharim. So kanaf is wings. So the Malbim says that it's an analogy. The Malbim says that when birds mate, so they lift up their wings to kind of like go in towards each other, and so that it's like the area is covered. So she says to him, somewhat like poetically, "Uparasta kanafecha al amasecha." Spread your wings on me. Okay, that's one possibility. The Malbim says another pshat, which is really very nice. Which is another meaning of the word kanaf. You say in Shema, right? Our tzitzis are al kanfei vigdehem, the corners of our beged, right? So what does this have to do with anything? So the Medrash says, and the Gemara says a few places, that there were, the concept of tzitzis specifically is the concept of looking at the tzitzis and reminding ourselves not to be lo sasur achrei levavchem achrei einechem, not to be carried away and influenced by, inappropriate behavior. So there's a story in the Gemara. It says that a guy was, a guy paid a prostitute, and he was going to go sleep with her, and then he's undressing, right? And the tzitzis get caught, and he says, "Oh, Yvei, how can I do this? Like tzitzis remind me not, to keep away from that act." So the Malbim says something very interesting. She says to him, "Spread your kanaf, the corner of your garment, on me." So she says to him, what I am suggesting is not out of lust and desire and passion, right? Meaning she's associating it with the tzitzis, which are supposed to keep someone away from that. And she says, "Ufarasta kanafecha ala masecha." Spread your garment with your tzitzis over me, because this is being done l'shem shamayim. It's not something which is being done improperly. Pasuk Yud, Vayomer, and he said, "Baruch ad la Adonai biti." You should be blessed to God. Heitavt chastech harachron min harishon. Your latter kindness was even better than your first one. What exactly that refers to? So Rashi, let's go with Rashi. Rashi says, right, meaning the fact that you're willing to want to marry me in order to do this on behalf of your husband is even greater than all the other kindnesses you've done for your mother-in-law. Rishon, the way you've been helping your mother-in-law until now. Because you're not choosing to go follow young men, imdal v'im ashir, whether they be poor or rich. Ve'ata, and now, pasuk yud aleph, biti, al tiri, do not be afraid, kol asher tomri eselacha, everything you say I'll do for you, ki yodea, because ki yodea kol sha'ar ami, because everyone here in the city knows, ki eshes chayil at, right, that you are a woman of valor, chayil. So this is not coincidental that how is Boaz introduced? Boaz is introduced in the beginning of the parak as in Parak Beis, right? Boaz is introduced as the Ish Gibor Chayil, right? And now he's calling her the Eshes Chayil. So it's probably not a coincidence, that connection. Pasuk Yud Beis, Vata now, Ki Amnam, Ki Goel Anochi. While it's true that I am the Goel, okay, again, either whether it just means I can buy your field, or like Geula, like the Ramban and Basi said, that it means I can perform this act. V'gam yesh goel karov mimeni. There is another goel who's really first in line, closer than I am. Pasuk Yud Gimel, Lini halayla, sleep here tonight. V'haya baboker, and it will be in the morning. Im yig alech tov yigal. Now, there's a big machlokas here what this means. It might mean, according to many, it means im yigalech tov yigal. If the person whose name is Tov will redeem you, then he's first in line, right? Meaning there was another person named Tov. Essentially, we said Nachshon had 3 children: Elimelech, who was Rus's father-in-law, Naomi's husband; Salmon or Salma, who was Boaz's father, who's not alive at this point; and the third brother is Tov. So Boaz says Tov is really closer related because he's the brother of Elimelech. And therefore, if he redeems you, he's really first in line. That's one possibility. The Ibn Ezra says, there's no person named Tov. There's no Tov. That's not a guy's name. The person's name later on, we're going to see. It's Ploni Almoni. It's not Tov. So the Ibn Ezra says, it means Im Yigalech. If he, that unnamed person, will redeem you, then Tov, Yigal, Tov. It's good. It's good. Then it will be taken care of. Okay, fine. So that can go either way. If he doesn't desire to redeem you, I will redeem you. Chai Adonai, swearing in the name of Hashem. Shichvi ad haboker, stay here until the morning. Pasuk Yudal. Vatishkav margalosav. So she lied down at his feet. Ad haboker until the morning. Vatakam, and she got up. B'terem yakir ish esrei ehu. Before any person would recognize another. Meaning while it was, I guess just before dawn. Vayomer, and he said, Al yivada, don't let it be known kiva ha'isha hagorem, that a woman came here. Because people will think the wrong thing. Not that he's trying to trick anyone, he's just saying people will get the wrong impression, so we're not gonna, make that public. Pasuk Tezvav, Vayomer, and he says to her, Havi hamid pachas, bring me the cloth, asher alayich, ve'ech ziba, that's on you, and I want you to hold on to this cloth. Vatochezba, and she held on to it. Vayamad sheish seorim, and he measured out 6 barleys. Vayasha saleha, and he put it on her, or on it. Vayavo ha'ir, and he accompanied her into the city. So, the Malbim says sheish seorim doesn't mean 6 pieces of barley. It's not going to do anything. He says sheish is a measurement. It's like nowadays it's like a half a cup. So sheish was a 1/6 cup, it was a 1/6 of something. A barley, and that's what he gave her. Last psukim here, Vatavo al chamosa, Vatomer mi'at biti. She comes to her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law says, "Who are you?" So either she's saying, "Who are you?" because it's still early in the morning, she can't see her. She says, "Who is it?" Or she's saying, "Mi'at biti," like, "Who are you? Where do you stand? Was it successful? How did it work out?" Vatagalais kol asher asala ha'ish, and she tells her everything that happened. Pasuk Zayin, Vatomer, and she says, "Sheish hasorim ha'ila nasani." He gave me this measurement of barley. Ki amar lai al tavoy rekam al chamosech. He said, I can't come back empty-handed to you. And Nami says, stay here, my daughter, until you see how will the matter fall, how will things turn out. Because the man will not be quiet, or he will not be settled, unless the matter is done today. Meaning, she was basically saying to her, it won't be long before we figure out that Boaz will either the other person will redeem you, or Boaz is going to take care of it. If he says he's going to do it, it won't be more than a day before that's done. So wait, and we'll see what happens. Have a great evening. Look forward to seeing you next week for Perek Dalet.
So what was the Chalitza experience?
That I was part of?